Hello everybody, my name is Kevin Carver and this is going to be a review of the Fuji X100V. This is my first camera review and the first video on this channel, so I'm going to try to get through it, so just bear with me. I got some notes, but I probably won't be able to do this in one take. So starting off, it's a rangefinder camera. So for a lot of people that might buy this camera or might be interested in this camera, there are... Got it right here, by the way, in case you want to see it. There are a lot of differences between a rangefinder camera and a traditional like SLR style camera with the viewfinder in the middle. Some differences are good and some differences might be bad. So the most obvious one is they're a little bit smaller, thinner and not as tall too. With that, you can usually fit them in like a smaller bag, and with this one, contrary to popular belief or what a lot of other people say, this will actually fit in your jean pocket. So let me show you. Got a pair of Wrangler jeans, regular blue jeans, right there. In the pocket, I got a little cord coming out, a wrist strap, so you can yank it out a little bit easier. Let me try to take a step back. You can see there's kind of a little bump and you can kind of tell something's in your pocket, but if you're wearing a lot of clothes, got a shirt on, a long shirt, you probably won't be able to see it, and it comes out pretty easy too. And the reason a lot of people say you can't really fit it in your pocket is because a lot of people that buy this camera, they wear super tight skinny jeans and they're hipsters, and they don't wear the type of jeans where you can actually fit things in your pocket. But if you're a normal person and you want to put this camera in your pocket and just take it with you real quick, you can do that. Because it's really small, it does get really hot, and because it's weather sealed for the most part too, I feel like there's not a lot of ventilation in this camera. When I first got it, I recorded a lot of 4K video with it. Not a lot, but enough, because I wanted to try it out, use all the things that it can do. Normally when you first get a camera, you do that kind of stuff. And I went to the skate park and I filmed some of my friends skateboarding. And the back of this camera, more specifically, right here, that area gets hot to the touch. Like when your laptop's trying to render a 4K 1 hour long video in Premiere and you touch right where the processor is, that's how hot it is. And, honestly, I guess it's a big deal, but you can't, the way that you use that camera, you're not going to be using it to where it gets hot like that anyway. You can't record. It's not a good camera for recording video, and that's usually the only time it gets really hot is when you're recording video. Because there's no IBIS, you can't record, 4K handheld like that. And for 99% of people, I think the camera really won't get hot for them. So like I said earlier, the biggest difference besides the actual size of it is the placement of the viewfinder. I don't know if I prefer it in the middle or on the side, but one thing's for sure, two things are for sure actually. With it being on the side like that and no hump, there's no room to make the viewfinder big. It's not a big viewfinder like you find on the X-T2, X-T3, X-T4. I think the one in the X-T30 might even be bigger, that series. I've never owned that line of camera, but I'm sure it's bigger. I don't know how much bigger the X Pro viewfinder is. Maybe they're the same magnification, but this one isn't that big. But I'll tell you what, it's big enough. The big viewfinders, in my opinion, they're really, really nice, but I don't know how often you need them. Another thing though, with the viewfinder, it might not be big, but with it being to the left like that, you actually can use your thumb to move the focus points when you have it up to your eye. Because on most cameras, I usually disable that because my nose ends up hitting the touch screen every single time I disable that. But with this camera, my nose is not even touching the screen on the back. I don't know if I can get an angle where you can see it, but and you can just move the points around with your thumb here. And that is one thing I actually do use on this camera. I don't use it that often because I have it in face detect a lot, but when I do need it, I use it like that. And I think that's a really good design aspect of the rangefinder camera with the feature where you can move it around with your thumb. I think that's really important. And one more difference, obviously, with a camera with the viewfinder in the middle, there's no window like this. That's the beauty of the X100 is you have an optical viewfinder as well and an electronic viewfinder. But Something you probably don't know if you've never owned a camera like this, and I didn't know either. I borrowed my friend's X100F, and I didn't notice it after a few days. I had it for like about a week, maybe a little bit over. But when I got this camera, I noticed it, maybe because I have more time with it. You have to clean not only the front of the lens, but you have to clean this little window right here too. Because even a small like smudge on there or something, you touch it with your finger, the quality of the optical viewfinder goes way, way down. I mean, a smudge on it, you can't see, little details in it. And I think that's important, at least like with the lens, you don't have to have a wipe like you do with the lens. I'm pretty sure you can just scrub it like that with your shirt or something, but you got to be wary of that. You can't always be grabbing the camera, anywhere you want to with a camera with an optical window like that. So I said I borrowed my buddy's X100F for about a week. And now this part of the review, I kind of want to talk about the differences between this camera and the F. One of the differences right away, you can look at the visuals, you can look at the pictures, where the buttons are and all of that. I'm not really going to talk about that. I want to talk about more about the differences that when you use it, you can tell, not by looking at pictures. But a couple of things that do have to do with the way it looks. Yeah, this camera does not have a D-pad. No D-pad on there. You know what? This is the type of camera where you set it up and you don't really change a whole lot anyway. The joystick is pretty good on it. And the only disadvantage to not having a D-pad is that you don't have as many custom buttons. And that is kind of a problem if you're the type of person to really go change a lot on your camera. But I leave it mostly in one type of shooting mode, and then the quick menu is really easy to change and move things around. So it's not really that big of a deal. Moving on to another visual difference is the paint. The silver one on the new one has more of a matte finish, and it looks absolutely stellar. Way better than the silver on the X100F. But the black, I'm pretty sure, is still like this really shiny, like piano black type finish. I don't know if it's focused right now. It's focusing on my face. But you can see that. And I wish they would have done a matte black too. That would have been really, really cool. I would have gone with the silver version, but I owned a silver X-T3 in the past, and I didn't really like how non-discreet it was. Especially with this type of camera, the silver is beautiful, but I wanted something that people aren't really gonna look at too much. Even though it is beautiful for me to look at, I feel like it's more important to actually use the camera, and that is why I got the black one. Also, I think if you're going to get a bigger camera like the X-T4, I think black looks more professional. Like, I think nowadays I would never get an X-T4 or X-T3 in silver, looking back at it. I only got the silver one because before, to get the silver finish, you had to pay extra, and now like they were the same price. So I was like, hell man, I'm gonna get the silver. But it's really not that great. I think the black looks more professional. Your clients would probably take you a little bit more seriously with a black camera, I think. And with an X100V, black is a little more stealth. So just one more visual design change with the X100V is they sharpened up the edges, kind of a little bit more like a Mac computer, has the sharp edges instead of the round edges, and it looks cool. But it makes the camera more susceptible to being scratched. Like, the edges are so sharp that if you rub them against anything, the paint on this black version especially, it rubs off a little bit. And let me show you, let me try to get that in the shot right here. You might be able to see a little bit of scratches right there and right there. And I don't baby this camera, but I definitely don't, knock it around on things that I think would be able to make those scratches. So I'm really close to the mic there, sorry. But I think those scratches are definitely something you're going to be seeing on your camera too if you buy it. Even if you do baby it. Unless you really baby it, in which case. Moving on to another difference. I found on the X100F, the previous version, this continuous focus mode selector got accidentally switched a lot on the left side right here. I put it in my bag and I take it out and it'd be different. It was super, super loose. This one, they fixed it. It's way, way more stiff, almost too stiff. Like, I don't even know if I can, like, I gotta push really hard to change that, and it's pretty good. But a lot of cameras do this. A little complaint I have about that is you can kind of see, I wish the manual focus was in the middle and then continuous and single were on the opposite end, so I can just push it as hard as I can and then, you know, be in continuous or single, because not many people use manual. And, you know, sometimes you want to, like, I feel like that'd be faster, even though it's one more click away. You know that you can always push at a certain level, because sometimes you push too hard and then it goes into manual, you know. And a lot of other cameras kind of have the same kind of design where manual is like on one end of it, and I think that's something that a lot of cameras should do. The ISO dial is different because on the old one it have like a spring mechanism where if you lift it like that and you let it go, it'd fall back down. This one is different. You know, you got to push it back down and then you can freely turn it when it's up like that. However, something that you've probably never heard of and you don't know unless you've used one is that it will not go back down unless you are in a specific ISO setting. So right now I'm between 250 and 320, and if I push it down, hold on, sorry, it's hard to do this and look at the camera too. So if I push it down, well, that time it won't go right there. If I'm between, it won't go down. I gotta rotate it and push it down too. And that's something that was kind of, you know, I'm used to it now. But when I first got the camera, I'd always be trying to, you know, push it down and it wouldn't go down because I'm between two different ISO settings. And the other one, you just let it go and the spring would come down and it would pick whichever one you're closest to, I'm pretty sure. I found the autofocus on the X100F to be pretty viable. Not the best, but in some situations, I definitely wish it was faster. You know, I was able to capture my friends, you know, running around on the beach, surfing pretty well. I'll probably put up one of my favorite pictures, maybe ever. Not my favorite, but one of them. And I took it with the X100F. And it captured it, and he was running away from me, and I think it was a pretty good shot. But there are times when people are moving that it just wouldn't capture them, like at a little bit faster than walking speed. And this camera is really not that much better. It's faster, you can tell, but it's marginally faster. But that margin does make a difference because you're not going to be shooting people running with this camera. But maybe if they're, you know, walking really fast or like a slow jog, you'll be able to get them. And I'm talking about, of course, you're going to get them in the continuous focus, but I'm talking about the focus being fast enough to snap a photo of somebody running in single focus, because you're not going to be switching between them all the time, you know. I mean, you can back button focus, but it only has one button for that, and I like to use that for my exposure lock. But the autofocus is definitely better. Not nearly not as fast as any of the XT cameras, but still pretty good. The new 23mm f2 on this camera is almost pretty much optically perfect. This is probably the best image quality you're going to get out of a Fuji APS-C camera to this date. Maybe when the X-H2 comes out with more megapixels, you'll probably get better image quality, but this camera is, I could not ask for anything more from this type of sensor, this type of camera. Super, super, super sharp. I'll put up a couple more photos right now and I'll zoom in. I did add a little bit of sharpness in post, I'll admit that, but you know, you're still seeing what you can get out of this camera, and I think that's important. With the X100F, the lens did have a lot of problems focusing near the closest distance it could, and I definitely noticed it. So that lens, I don't know why they even made it focus that close if the image quality is so garbage, you know. They should have disabled that or something. I mean, maybe having it is better than not having it, but definitely they shouldn't let people take trash pictures with that camera like that. But this camera solves all those issues. You can focus super close and it'll be sharp as well. This 23mm f2 is sharper than the X-mount 23mm f2, which is sharper than the X100F. The 23 1.4, I've never used it, so I don't know where it falls, but I doubt it can be sharper than this, honestly. So the stuff I talked about so far, probably the bad things at least, probably aren't deal breakers, but now I kind of want to dive into some of the more important things, some of the bigger things that I wish this camera could do, or that it does and that I don't like. I got some notes right here. So the first one is 2.5 millimeter headphone jack. I know I said you can't use it for video anyway, or you shouldn't at least, so there's no reason to, you know. Maybe it, you know, it does a quick clip here and there, and you're probably not going to have a headphone or carrying a mic around with you, but 2.5 millimeter headphone jack, there's plenty of room in there for a 3.5 millimeter jack. I swear they, what? I forget if it came with an adapter, but I really wish that was different. That's one of the biggest imperfections on this camera, I think. Speaking of the mic, another giant flaw with this camera is that when you are recording video, more reason not to record video. The internal mic, and I don't know if it does it, I don't think it'll do it with the external, but I haven't tested that, but the internal mic, it is stereo, so it has 2 different tracks, but one track is a good like 10 decibels louder than the other one, no matter what you do. Like it'll be, you know, you can turn the volume all the way up inside a quiet room and look at the ambient sound, and it'll always be louder. And I don't know if they can fix that in a firmware update. I don't know if they already have. I haven't checked that since I found the problem a couple months ago. But yeah, you should look into that. Maybe I'll do another video checking it, but right now I'm pretty sure it still has that problem. You know, I think Ken Rockwell mentioned it too, that it has that problem. And that's something that they need to fix, because that is a terrible flaw in the camera. You know, your audio is not going to be, it's just messed up from the start. A complaint that people had besides the overheating when the camera first came out is that the focus ring kind of had a crunch to it when you rotated it. Mine did when I got it, but now not so much anymore. I don't know why. You know, I think I've just rotated the crunch out of it enough, and it's not because I manually focus. When you have the lens cap on like that, and you rotate the lens cap, and which often happens when you just put it in your bag or in your pocket or something, it also rotates the focus ring. So you're going to be rotating that focus ring a little more than you think you would. And I think that got the crunch out the more that you used it, and it really wasn't that bad of a crunch. I mean, it didn't even make a sound really for me. It was just more of like a feeling of tension, you know, maybe a feeling of sand or something in there, but it wasn't that bad. So as a lot of people know, the optical viewfinder has a little option where, let me turn the camera on and show you real quick. So there's the optical viewfinder. If you press this lever in the opposite direction to change, you know, if you press it in one direction, let me put my thumb over the sensor, it changes between the optical and electronic. But if you push it in the other direction, it adds a little window in there at the bottom right. And that window, what it does is it shows you the focus point, the electronic version of whatever focus point you're on. So, you know, maybe you want to check your focus or something. But I'm sure they could somehow in that window make it so you could view your entire frame electronic, like a little mini electronic viewfinder inside of your optical viewfinder. And I would really like that, not so much for framing, but for checking exposure, because you don't see your exposure when you're looking through the optical, you know. And if you could just at a glance, you know, look if you're getting the sky or something in the shot, you know, or a specific shadow you want, if your shadows are dark enough, I feel like that'd be really important, and that'd be a really good tool for street photographers to get a better sense of what they're doing. Maybe, you know, they have a shot lined up already, and, you know, they need to make the exposure correct, but they, you know, they got somebody walking in the shot that they want in the shot, and they don't have that much time. And in that scenario, you pretty much have to guess. And yeah, there's some skill to that, but I feel like if you just hit that switch one time, and then instead of guessing, you turn it to what you want, I feel like that'd make a big difference. Another thing that I don't know why they don't do is you cannot use face detection when you're using the optical viewfinder. It just goes into like point selection AF, and, you know, if you have it in face detection, it'll go back to face detection when you go to the electronic. But I don't know why they can't. Like the sensor is on. You know, you're getting a meter and you're getting autofocus, and it has to do that off the sensor. It's not like a DSLR, you know, where your sensor doesn't really come on until you press the button. It's all built in there, so it's reading information off of it. So I don't know why they can't also put in face detection in there as well. You know, just move the little box in the optical viewfinder over the face. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, and I feel like that would really help a lot. You know, and that'd be sorry, I'm looking at the screen. I'm looking at myself. I should be looking at the camera. I feel like that'd make a big difference. People would really enjoy that. With Fuji cameras, I don't know if all cameras have face detection use this. I've never really, I started using, when face detection first started coming out on cameras, I switched from DSLRs to the time. I've never really owned another mirrorless camera that does face detection. I've used A6000s in the past, but I don't think they had face detection at that time. But Fuji cameras only can use matrix metering and face detection. If you try to change the metering, what it's called photometry in the land of Fuji. But if you try to change that while you're in face detection mode, you can't. It's grayed out, you know. And I was really confused for a while about that, and I don't know why. But you know, you can't use center weighted. You cannot use spot metering. You can only use matrix when you're in face detection. And same thing with this camera. If you have face detection on, you cannot use spot or center weighted. Only matrix. Classic Negative is a new film simulation. I think they brought it to the X Pro 3 first. Yeah, X Pro 3, and then this camera, and then the X-T4. I got some mixed opinions about it. It's a pretty decently, it's fun to use, and it's a pretty decent film simulation. It's definitely one of the more stylized ones, but I don't think it's going overboard. You know, there's so many different styles of films. You know, people are saying, oh, this is going into the creative, you know, the other kind of line of things you can do to a JPEG. You know, there's like creative styles in Sony, and then there's picture styles or something like that. But I don't think it's going too far into that. Bleach bypass, neither is that. I don't remember if it's on here. I don't use that anyway. But for X-T4 owners, bleach bypass is not going into that territory either. I think it's absolutely fine for Fuji to do these kind of things with the film simulations, but Classic Negative is very weird. I know it's supposed to replicate Xperia, but I feel like it's better used indoors because it blows out the highlights so much more than any other film simulation. Even if you turn the highlight toning all the way down, it'll still usually blow out the clouds in your sky if you have matrix metering on. So that, as well as the green tones, look kind of weird outside sometimes. I feel like it's really good to use indoors. You know, it kind of gives your indoor photos more of a pop, because not only are they brighter, but they do have a kind of some different colors. So I think it's probably good for that too. I don't really have too much use with it. I've shot a couple things with it. What I do is when I do the film simulations, I don't know why more people don't talk about this, is that I shoot raw in the camera, and then it's super easy to just pick, if you hit the Q button while you're reviewing the photos, you can turn it into any film simulation you want. So I always do that, you know, if I want the JPEG and I want it a specific way. And you can even do a little bit of changing the exposure that way too. I found that if you do it that way and change the exposure, you can probably go about a stop in each direction. You can do it more than a stop in the camera, but it's not as good as Photoshop would be doing with a raw file. But you can pick your film simulation after the shot, and you know, you can pick anything after the shot. So I do it that way, and I think it's better used indoors, just because I feel like it suits it better. And it's a good addition, a very good addition to the Fujifilm film simulations. And finally I had to mention it, there's no in-body image stabilization in this camera. It's not that big of a deal. There's two big things with it, okay? One, it makes shooting video useless in 4K. You can shoot video in 1080 without image stabilization on a handheld camera, but not in 4K. You know, there's too much detail, there's too much wobbliness in the photo, shakiness. You can really notice that in 4K. You can shoot a Canon DSLR in 1080 handheld all day, and it really wouldn't be that bad. But, you know, once I jumped to the X-T2 and started shooting 4K with my prime Fujicron lenses, I was like, this is impossible. And warp stabilizer can only do so much. So that is a big reason for it. I know, IBIS isn't really meant for video, but it does really, really help a lot, especially in the X-T4. But another thing that makes IBIS important is in your photos, sometimes you want a little bit of motion blur, but you don't have a tripod on you. And when I say motion blur, handheld, everything else is sharp, but there's a little bit of motion in the photo. When I take cell phone photos, my cell phone has a stabilizer in the lens, and it often goes down to slower shutter speeds, and I can get some pretty interesting indoor shots, with motion blur that I couldn't get on this camera, just because I'd be holding the camera and my subject would be, a little bit blurry. And I think with digital photography compared to film photography is it's all about getting the perfect shot, because otherwise, why would you shoot digital? It's about getting more detail. It's about getting more dynamic range. It's about doing exactly what you want to make the picture perfect in your eyes. And if the photo is slightly blurry, whatever your subject is focused on, I throw that photo out. I say I could have done better next time. And with this camera, you cannot. I feel like I don't want to sacrifice a blurry subject for the motion blur that I want, which I could do in a camera like the X-T4, and I can do on my cell phone. And so I probably already did, but I'll throw up a few shots I took on my phone. They're really not that good quality, so I'm not going to make them too big on the screen. But as you can see, the subject is sharp, and there's a little bit of motion blur, and it tells the story of the photo a little bit better. Before I conclude the review, I just want to say I can't wait until Fujifilm comes out inevitably with their X100, or with like a full frame X100 with IBIS and a 3.5mm headphone jack. I feel like that'd be the perfect camera. I could even use these same batteries. I don't care about the big Fuji batteries in a camera like this. That would be amazing, something to compete with the Leica Q. I think it's the Leica Q. And it'd probably be way cheaper if they could price that around, $2,500. That'd be really, really cool. But right now, this is what we got. And I'd like to say a few more words and my opinions about it before I conclude the review. Currently, this is my most used camera. I don't know if it is that way because I enjoy picking it up and going to shoot with it more, or if it's just making me lazy. I don't know if I'm taking better pictures because I am taking pictures, or if I'm not taking better pictures because maybe I could have switched to this specific lens and took a better picture like that. I think that's up to you to decide. That's why I own two cameras, two digital cameras. I have an X-T4 and I have this camera. But I feel like that's something you really got to think about is, does it make you better or does it make you worse? It definitely makes me shoot more, but I don't know about better. But it's definitely fun, and I think that is an important thing. Another thing I want to say about it before I finish the video, is that this camera, from the outside, before you open the door to the 2.5mm headphone jack, it is visually a perfect camera, right? But I don't know if that makes it appealing. Sometimes perfect things are not very interesting. I much prefer the design of the X Pro 3. That camera is bold. That camera, when you look at it, you know that's an X Pro 3. With the slanted side end, with the weird screen. That camera is bold and it's interesting. And I really applaud Fujifilm for making a camera like that. It's not like some cookie cutter do-it-all camera. It's a very interesting camera, and I think the downsides of that camera really don't outweigh the purpose of it and its reason for existing. This camera is very, very, very nice, but and it's not perfect because when you start using it, you start noticing the little flaws in it. But I think I preferred, the older style X100F styling a little bit more because it was distinctly Fuji. This camera, it has the bar going across the top and the bottom at the same the same level on each side of the lens, and I think it looks really cool. But so I read a comment and it explained it pretty well. The X-T20 and the X-T2, X-T30, X-T3, they look different because of the grip is raised a little bit higher on the X-T3, and that's how Fuji defines their higher end cameras from their lower end cameras. Usually is by how high that grip goes or extends, to the plate, to the top plate. And with this camera, it makes it almost look a little bit feminine. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's just not something that I personally enjoy. It looks almost like a toy, like a toy Leica, a perfect toy Leica, but almost like not real. And I think it loses kind of that distinct Fujifilm styling, and in that it loses a little bit of identity too. But I think that is something to think about with this camera. Is you're spending a lot of money on this camera, and a good amount of that is because you think it looks nice. But I think that's something to think about when you're thinking about the visuals of it. It is still very, very beautiful camera, but is perfection, or what was the title of this video?